Just in terms of questions, I'm going to now hand over to Maria Jennings. Maria is the Director of Food Standards Agency in Northern Ireland, and Maria will chair the questions and answer session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. And I would also like to say thank you to all of our contributors this morning. Fantastic presentations. We are going to have our Q&A session, but we're running tight on time. So we have a closing remarks from the Minister, and we want the Minister in the South of Ireland, and we want to be able to bring him in a timely way. So we've got about 10 minutes for our panel, but we may then actually hold on to our panel and just ask another couple of questions if we're able to squeeze them in before 1:30. So just while the panel is coming forward, I'm going to invite everybody forward. I'm just going to do a wee quick recap on what we heard. Firstly, from Bertrand this morning about the rising cost of living and how increases in food prices were reaching about 30%, and he outlined some of the reasons why that was happening, and also brought us some sobering statistics on why the increase in fuel and also in the cost of transport and the cost of food is really affecting some parts of our society in much bigger ways than others. And then we had Aylan Sophie from the FSA talking to us about the surveys that we have been running and showing some figures, again worrying about a quarter of households that are worried that their food will run out before they get money to buy some more food, which is very sobering. We had Megan, and I think Megan has now gone off for her flight, so that's good. We got plenty of time to question Megan. And then finally, James from Department for Communities. Thank you, James, who was explaining how the social supermarket pilot came about, and the small funding packet that was provided there allowed an awful lot of local innovation and created access to food for so many people who are in need. So I want to firstly invite members of the audience in the room to come forward and ask some questions. And again, we have our roving mic. And then we'll also bring in some questions from the people who are online as well. Claire.
Thank you. My name is Claire Holmes, I'm a dietitian. I was interested in the last presentation about social supermarkets, and I just wondered, you'd mentioned about healthy eating advice being given. Could you elaborate a little bit on what is given and how that is delivered?
I suppose there probably isn't a uniform answer to that across the 5. Some of those healthy eating advice is provided through PHA funded schemes that the pilots themselves were already running or have linked into since they launched it. So it's very much about linking in with the likes of PHA and other providers who are already delivering that. The organisations themselves maybe aren't necessarily the experts in that, but it's about identifying a need and then networking and making those links with those other providers to bring as much as they can into their operation.
Well, has there been any looking at maybe using social supermarkets as a means of spreading information, for instance, about the Healthy Start scheme, which obviously is aimed at pregnant women and children in reduced circumstances, or looking at giving out other general health-related nutritional advice like vitamin D supplementation in general?
As part of it may well be happening already in some of the 5. As part of the co-design process, we are speaking to the likes of PHA, I suppose at the regional level, and keeping them up to speed on what's happening. And we would be looking for opportunities to bring in anything like that we can, and allow other other statutory bodies to use the model as a vehicle for them to deliver, against their objectives, and hopefully help them reach the people that they're trying to get to as well.
And do you envisage there being maintaining of the existing pilot to become as an actual mainstream project, and even expansion in the coming years, especially with the cost of living crisis being potentially so severe?
by the conclusion of I suppose of this year, we would hope that there's social supermarket activity happening in all level of the council areas. The pilots are obviously running at the end of this year. We'll work with the councils concerned around the future handling of those, and they may well form the basis of what that council decides to take forward. But as I say, I suppose especially in the budgetary uncertainty we're in, we'll have to play that by ear. As you rightly say, the cost of living crisis, demand for this sort of service is going to increase. So personally, I would like to be able to certainly we'll be bidding for additional money to support the work, because what's there at the minute is probably a drop in the ocean.
Thank you.
Question up at the back. Great.
Hi, Kerry Melville, Melrish, and I've got two questions. One to Bertram. Do you know how the increase in the minimum wage was calculated? I mean, how much of a gap there is between the minimum wage and the potential living, real wage? Because there's quite a gap in the UK, and then there's one for Sophia after that as well.
Bertrand, do you want to answer that first? Like the gap in the minimum wage and how it was calculated in terms of minimum wage versus living wage.
I think, if I remember correctly, I think I don't know very much really about that. I think, the living wage is really based on, the cost of items, which are being seen as necessary. So I don't know exactly, I think, the gap is not that large, if I remember exactly, in the Republic anyway. I don't know exactly how much it is, but I don't think it's that large. I'm talking about maybe, because here we're talking about, in terms of hourly wage, maybe it's something like around maybe €1, €2 difference between the minimum wage and the living wage. Yeah.
It's still €8 to €10 difference a day, though, isn't it? Which is a lot when you're on that, on those low rungs. Thank you very much. Sophia, there was you made a really interesting comment about sustainable food being much more expensive and inaccessible to people. So I was just wondering what sort of, how do you describe and understand sustainable food per se?
That's an interesting question, and one that we're trying to work through at the moment. So we published our updated strategy earlier in the year. We hadn't really had a focus on sustainability before, but as part of our strategy moving forward, that's certainly something that we want to look at. We've recently published a literature review, or a rapid evidence review actually, with City University of London, to kind of look at sustainable food and the definition of sustainable food, sustainable diet, and it is quite a complicated definition. There's also not much understanding for consumers when it comes to the definition, so people don't quite know how to define it or how to kind of prioritize it when it comes to food choices. But in terms of the academic definition of sustainability versus what businesses are trying to put forward in their plans, there's quite a bit of a difference. So it's a bit of an, I guess, an unfamiliar territory, but I think that's part of our plan moving forward. But in terms of the research that I presented on, we did look at people's food choices and how much environment and sustainability played a part in that. And I think the key thing that came out in that research really was that people felt that they really wanted to make more conscious, sustainable food choices, but they didn't feel that they had the power or the budget to do so. And they felt it was more of a systemic issue that people in government or food industry should be kind of, increasing awareness and familiarity about, so that people could make those choices and actually be able to afford to make them. But at the moment, I think things like price and health and nutrition are just above sustainability, and it feels a bit out of reach for consumers anyway.
It's really interesting actually to hear that gotten in onto some of the supermarket tricks. That's new, and that was good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sophie, while you have the microphone, we'll let you keep it. There's a question online. Why are young adults more likely to experience food insecurity?
Yeah, so that's a question what we were talking about earlier, actually, and I think we don't have we don't have kind of a straight answer in terms of what the data is saying, but I think in terms of the life stage that people are at this point in time. So we saw higher levels of food insecurity among people who were aged 25 to 34 versus people who were older. And these people tend to be, quite early on in their careers, or they've got a slightly lower income. They're potentially renting. They might have dependents or children at home that they're trying to support. It might be that they're young professionals and they're sort of, building their career. So they're more likely to suffer from or struggle with food insecurity because they don't have the disposable income, and they're just trying to support them, themselves and their families. So that's how we see it, but we don't quite have, the data to give an exact answer.
Thank you very much.